I'm Chloe. After graduating from college, I worked as an office employee. In my student years, I went to an all-girls high school and didn't have much opportunity to interact with guys. The only relationship I had was with Mason, whom I met through a friend. Mason worked for a major corporation. He was incredibly good-looking, like a celebrity, and had great style. I was head over heels for him. Then came a day when I knew I absolutely wanted to marry Mason. While waiting for Mason, who was late to our meeting spot, I received a call. Following the voice on the other end, I turned around to find Mason standing there with a big bouquet of roses. "Will you marry me?" I thought I was dreaming when Mason, smiling, offered me those words along with the bouquet of roses. I immediately said yes, and we embraced, public setting or not. I was thrilled by Mason's proposal, which felt like a scene from a drama. Little did I know then what Mason's true nature was. After getting engaged, Mason and I started to talk about practical matters concerning our marriage. First, there was the issue of our parents. Both Mason and I are only children, so we'd have to take care of our parents eventually. We decided each would look after their own parents, so we wouldn't burden each other. Next, we discussed whether to combine our incomes or not. I was okay with merging them, but Mason said, "We shouldn't rely too much on each other's income, so let's keep them separate." I agreed. Following that, we decided not to disclose each other's savings. We agreed to each contribute half to our living expenses. Other decisions included the number of children we'd like to have, the area where we'd live, and whether we'd opt for a standalone house or an apartment. There were many decisions to make, but I believed I could do anything if it meant spending my life with Mason. When we went to announce our engagement to father-in-law and mother-in-law, whom I'd met before and gotten along well with, that belief started to waver. As usual, mother-in-law and father-in-law welcomed me warmly with smiles and said, "Chloe, welcome." We entered the house, and due to the special occasion of announcing our engagement, I felt a bit nervous. In the living room, Mason, father-in-law, mother-in-law, and I took our seats. My in-laws happily congratulated us on our engagement. "I was wondering when you two would get married. I'm relieved that you finally gotten engaged," mother-in-law said, and Mason chuckled shyly. I also felt my cheeks go red. While father-in-law and mother-in-law never stopped smiling at our youthful enthusiasm, something father-in-law said made me start questioning Mason. "So, when are you planning to move in together? We need to prepare for the move too. You're not thinking of living in this house, are you? It'll get cramped when you have children." Huh? Move in together? My bewildered expression made father-in-law and mother-in-law puzzled as well. Only Mason looked a bit uncomfortable. "Wait, what?" said mother-in-law, giving me a suspicious glance. "Chloe is going to be financially supported by Mason, right? It's only natural that you live together. I did the same thing. Isn't that right, hon?" Father-in-law nodded. "Yeah, that's true." Mason chuckled awkwardly and muttered, "Sorry." This meant Mason hadn't told his parents anything about our discussed plans for married life. This was the first time I felt disbelief and disappointment in Mason for not communicating with his parents. The man I deeply loved and saw as a prince suddenly seemed unreliable. But I've heard that's what marriage is like. I suppose there are sides of Mason that only become visible after engagement. I started to explain to father-in-law and mother-in-law, convincing myself that this was all part of it. I don't plan on relying financially on Mason. I'm not quitting my job. And we've decided to individually take care of our own parents. "Hold on, Chloe. You should reconsider. Sure, women are advancing in society, but Mason has a good salary. It would benefit the household. Isn't it heartless to care for your parents separately?" We're both only children, and our parents are roughly the same age. We decided it'd be better to each care for our own parents, especially if they fall ill at the same time. Father-in-law and mother-in-law had complicated looks on their face, but I continued to explain with unwavering conviction. I didn't want to ruin my relationship with them, but I also wanted to live the married life Mason and I had agreed upon. I don't know Mason's income or savings, but considering where he works, I know he earns a decent wage. However, quitting my job isn't an option for me. Do you have such an important job, Chloe? I hesitated a bit, then nodded. Yes, actually, my dad runs a company that I'm supposed to take over in a few years. Father-in-law and mother-in-law were shocked. I was further disappointed in Mason for not informing them, as he knew about this. So do you have a higher income then? Because my parents own property, I own a few apartments in my name, so yes, I believe my income is higher than Mason's. I've been receiving a substantial income since 9th grade, thanks to the properties my dad transferred to me. I don't spend much, so I have more savings than Mason too. I had heard that men are intimidated by high-earning women, so I was actually relieved when we decided not to disclose our incomes. Mason knew I was studying hard to become a future CEO, but he was also shocked to find out about the apartments. After that, the conversation turned to how many apartments I owned, how much I earn, and how much I've saved. Even Mason joining in despite our prior agreement to keep those details private. That day, I somehow dodged a barrage of questions, not revealing my income or savings, and made it home. But Mason changed after that. He became increasingly interested in my finances. When we talked, the subject of money came up, and if we went on a shopping date, he'd ask for expensive brands. I would refuse, saying, "We agreed to keep our finances separate. If you want it, buy it with your own money." Doing so would put Mason in a visibly bad mood, and the atmosphere would sour. The real shock came when Mason stayed over at my house. When I came out of the bathroom, I found him rummaging through my desk drawers. "What are you doing?" I asked. "Just seeing if you have a bank book or something," he replied with a guilty expression like a child caught in mischief. At that moment, the idea of breaking off the engagement crossed my mind. Mason was no longer the Prince Charming he once was. He changed his attitude as soon as he learned about my income and savings, and it deeply hurt me. But Mason was my first love. I couldn't forget his romantic proposal with the big bouquet of roses, nor could I completely abandon my feelings for him. Should I leave him, though I still loved him? As I was mulling over these conflicting emotions, an incident occurred. That day, I was distracted by a headache at work. Sleep deprivation from worrying about Mason was probably the cause. I felt I couldn't let personal issues affect my work if I was to become a boss one day. I must have looked unwell because a coworker noticed. Since it wasn't a busy period and the staff had some bandwidth, I decided to leave early. As I reached my front door, I felt ashamed of not being able to manage even my health and noticed something odd. The door was already unlocked. For a moment, I wondered if I had forgotten to lock it, but that had never happened before. I was fully aware of the risks of living alone as a woman and was cautious. So who unlocked the door? Despite my unease, I opened the door. Only then did I think of the possibility of an intruder inside. Panicked, I grabbed an umbrella from the stand as a makeshift weapon. I was so flustered that I didn't notice until I heard a noise from deeper inside. A gasp escaped from my lips. Someone was still inside. I couldn't handle this on my own. "I have to call the police," I muttered in a shaky voice, reaching for my phone. Just then, someone sprang out from the hallway. "No!" I screamed, bending down out of fear. Wait, a familiar voice yelled out. "Huh?" As I slowly lift my head, I see Mason standing there, wearing a knit cap, a mask, and gloves. Mason looked like an intruder. Actually, he is an intruder, because I never gave him a spare key. Why? "I wanted to know how much money you make, Chloe, so I snuck into your place." "Without permission? How?" My voice trembles with fear as I ask, and Mason pulls a key out of his pocket. "A spare key. I made it without asking you when you stayed over at my place." The tears that fell were a mix of relief from mortal danger and boiling rage. I had never been this angry in my life. I pushed away Mason's hand, which was rubbing my back in an attempt to calm me, and screamed, "Are you kidding me?" in a voice so full of anger, I doubted it was my own. Mason, who had only seen my typically calm side, was stunned and fell on his rear, but my rage wasn't over. Making a spare key without permission is criminal. And what's with the disguise? Were you planning to steal my bank book if I hadn't come back? No, I just wanted to check. Check what? We agreed to keep our finances separate after marriage. I know you changed your attitude the moment you found out I have some money. I throw my umbrella at Mason, who staggers back, letting out a pathetic whoa. Why did I ever think someone so pathetic, sneaky, and money-minded was Prince Charming? My dream, which had been so joyously accepted, along with a bouquet of roses, had come to an end. I grab Mason's belongings left in the room and throw them outside, pulling Mason out by the arm. Ignoring Mason's plea to wait, I yell, "Get out! The engagement is off, and I never want to see you again. Wait, Chloe, I truly love you. No need for your love anymore. Goodbye." I slam the door shut. My love for Mason completely chilled. Everything goes surprisingly smooth as I check that my bank book is intact, explain the situation to my parents, and call my future in-laws. My future mother-in-law pleads, "Please don't sue Mason." I had no intention of doing so, so I coldly reply, "Cutting off ties is enough for me." My parents are furious at Mason's actions, and the engagement is swiftly called off. My dad was angrier at Mason than anyone else. Knowing Mason's boss personally, my dad spilled the beans, saying, "Your employee did this to my daughter." Mason's company was lesser in standing compared to my dad's. Panicked, Mason's boss transferred him to a remote location and demoted him. And so, my first love came to an end. I learned the hard way that love is over the moment money gets involved. Later, Mason marries Lily, a successful CEO. Mason was handsome, and Lily, who was rumored to like good-looking men, must have been charmed. Mason had quit his job and was living a life full of golf, horse racing, and casinos. But Lily, just a few months into their marriage, had enough of Mason's lack of work ethic. She kicked him out, handing him $1,000 and divorce papers. "You lose yourself with this money," she said, as Lily, who didn't know I was Mason's ex, later told me. I totally get where Lily was coming from. Mason was the kind of guy you'd want to kick to the curb. After that whole ordeal with Mason, I dove into my work. Friends at the time say there was an intensity to me, working with the resolve to make my job my lifelong partner. But there was a man who found that intensity appealing. He kept pursuing me, and though I initially resisted, I eventually felt drawn to him. Now, we're married, and we've been blessed with 3 children. Taking over for my dad, I've become the company president. My husband has taken all the household duties as a stay-at-home dad. Once the kids are grown, my husband wants to contribute to my company, and that's why he's my ideal Prince Charming. As for Mason, after Lily left him, he even tapped into his parents' money. He's been cut off by his family, and nobody knows where he is now. Looking back, he was a prime example of how greed can ruin a life.